December 8, 1999. Memphis, Tennessee. Shelby County Circuit Court. A jury of 12 people, 6 black and 6 white, has just finished hearing 4 weeks of testimony. More than 70 witnesses. Thousands of pages of evidence. And now they are asked a single question. Was Martin Luther King Jr. killed as a result of a conspiracy? They deliberate for approximately 1 hour. The verdict is unanimous. Yes, King was assassinated as the result of a conspiracy involving a Memphis businessman, the Mafia, and governmental agencies of the United States. The family of Martin Luther King did not ask for millions. They asked for $100. They wanted the truth, and a jury gave it to them. This trial happened. A jury of American citizens found the United States government complicit in the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. And almost nobody knows about it. The major newspapers buried the story. The Washington Post ran an editorial saying the verdict should be forgotten as quickly as possible. The New York Times called the conspiracy alleged, but not proved. And the King family spent 30 years fighting for this day. Their own government fought to make sure you would never hear about it. If this investigation changes how you see American history, subscribe now. We go where the official story stops. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover signed off on the first wiretap of Martin Luther King Jr. in February 1963. The order came not from a court, but from the top of the Bureau, citing national security and the supposed threat of communist infiltration. Over the next 5 years, the FBI logged more than 1,000 hours of King's private conversations. Phones at his home, his office, and his hotel rooms across the country were tapped. Every call, every meeting, every strategy session was recorded, transcribed, and filed in thick folders at FBI headquarters. The surveillance didn't stop at electronics. The Bureau built a network of informants inside King's closest circle. Some were paid, others pressured. Reports arrived daily. Who visited, what was said, what King was planning next. By 1965, the roster of FBI informants embedded in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference had grown to more than a dozen. Their job was not just to observe, but to disrupt. They fed rumors back to headquarters, seeded suspicion among King's allies, and reported on his movements in real time. The Church Committee, a bipartisan Senate investigation in 1975, later called this campaign unlawful and a gross abuse of power. Their report described a government agency using the tools of espionage against an American citizen whose only crime was demanding equal rights. The committee found no credible evidence that King or his organization had ties to any foreign power. Still, the surveillance continued, deeper and more personal. The goal was clear: to discredit, to isolate, and ultimately to neutralize Martin Luther King Jr. as a national leader. This was not a rogue operation. It was policy, documented and approved at the highest level of government. On November 21, 1964, a plain manila envelope arrived at the King family's Atlanta home. It was addressed to Coretta Scott King. Inside, she found a typed letter and a cassette tape. The letter's language was vicious. It called her husband a fraud, a liar, and an animal. It said his end was near and that there was only one way out. The tape claimed to contain evidence of King's private life, spliced together from hotel room surveillance, hours of tape the FBI had collected over months of wiretaps and hidden microphones. The threat was clear. The envelope bore a Miami postmark, not Washington. No return address. Inside, the letter's typeface matched FBI internal memos. Years later, the original draft turned up in the files of Assistant Director William Sullivan, with his handwritten edits in the margins. The FBI's own records, released through the Freedom of Information Act, show Sullivan personally oversaw the operation. The Church Committee would later confirm that the FBI sent the package, intending to break King's spirit and drive him to resign. Or worse. The letter gave King 34 days to comply. It threatened public exposure, disgrace, and ruin. Its intent was unmistakable: psychological warfare, delivered straight to the family's doorstep. The Bureau's seal was not on the envelope, but its fingerprints were everywhere: in the language, in the logistics, in the chain of command. Historian Beverly Gage in 2014 uncovered the unredacted original in the National Archives. The words were not the product of a fringe actor. They were drafted, revised, and mailed by federal agents as a matter of policy. This was not surveillance. This was a personal threat. The most powerful law enforcement agency in the United States had crossed the line from watching to attacking, using the tools of the state to try and destroy a citizen's mind. The evidence is not rumor or speculation. It is documented. On June 26, 1967, J. Edgar Hoover issued a memo from FBI headquarters that would reshape the Bureau's campaign against Martin Luther King Jr. The document, classified at the time, described King's growing opposition to the Vietnam War as a direct threat to national security. Hoover instructed his agents to intensify their efforts, authorizing not only continued surveillance but also new tactics to curtail King's public influence. The language was blunt. King was to be neutralized by the most effective means. Within weeks, FBI field offices began circulating internal bulletins flagging King's anti-war speeches. Informants were told to report on every planning session for marches or rallies. The Bureau's files from the summer of 1967 swell with references to King's criticism of the Johnson administration, each flagged as a potential risk to the country's stability. Hoover's directive gave these reports a new urgency. Dissent was no longer just a political problem, it was officially a matter of national defense. The impact rippled outward. In Memphis, city officials began coordinating with the FBI as King's Poor People's Campaign took shape. When King's organizers filed for a permit to march in April 1968, the application was denied. The city clerk's archive records the rejection, dated April 3rd, just one day before King was killed. The stated reason was public safety, but FBI memos from the preceding weeks show a coordinated push to limit King's ability to organize large gatherings. A cable from the Memphis field office, dated March 28th, warned of violent backlash and advised minimal police presence. The result was clear. King's movement faced not only surveillance and harassment, but also administrative roadblocks designed to isolate him from the crowds that gave his message power. The escalation from wiretaps to direct obstruction was not accidental. It was the documented outcome of Hoover's 1967 order, a campaign that treated dissent as a danger to be managed, not a right to be protected. On March 4, 1968, a Memphis Police Department wiretap picked up a call that would later surface as a key exhibit in the King family's civil case. Lieutenant Earl Clark, a high-ranking officer, was recorded discussing what he called the King situation, with language that suggested more than routine police work. The transcript, entered into evidence decades later, captured Clark referencing the need for a cover-up and coordination with outside parties. The tape did not name names, but it placed a local law enforcement official in the middle of quiet plotting just weeks before the assassination. The money trail runs parallel to the wire. On July 22, 1968, a bank ledger showed a $30,000 cash withdrawal by Frank Liberto, a Memphis produce dealer with rumored ties to organized crime. The withdrawal came months after King's death, but matched the figure cited in multiple witness accounts as the price for arranging the killing. At the 1999 trial, the ledger was presented as Exhibit 12, a concrete record, not hearsay. Liberto's name appeared in both FBI surveillance summaries and in the testimony of Lloyd Jowers, the Memphis bar owner who claimed to have acted as a middleman. The combination of intercepted conversations and financial records did not prove every detail of a plot, but it established that the mechanics of conspiracy were more than rumor. The jury in Memphis heard the voices, saw the bank records, and weighed the evidence against the official story. The paper trail and the wiretap transcript remain in the public record, part of the case file that still raises questions about who paid, who planned, and who pulled the strings behind the fatal shot. April 4, 1968. A single shot rang out as Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. The bullet struck him in the jaw, tore downward, and ended his life within an hour. Police recovered a Remington .30-30 rifle, abandoned near the scene, and within hours, James Earl Ray became the prime suspect. The official story moved quickly. Ray's rifle, fired from a boarding house bathroom window, had killed King. But from the beginning, the physical evidence left more questions than answers. The FBI's own ballistics report, completed in 1970, could not match the rifle to the fatal bullet with certainty. The report stated that the bullet was too damaged for a positive identification. No conclusive rifling marks, no definitive match. The chain of custody on the rifle and bullet fragments changed hands multiple times, from the crime scene to the Memphis police to the FBI lab, leaving gaps that would later trouble independent investigators. Nearly 3 decades later, a 1997 university study re-examined the bullet fragments using more advanced microscopes. The result was the same: inconclusive. The lead ballistics expert testified at the 1999 civil trial that he could not say, to a scientific certainty, that Ray's rifle fired the shot that killed King. The Department of Justice, in its 2000 review, acknowledged these findings but argued that the totality of evidence still pointed to Ray. The official narrative depended on a weapon that could not be definitively tied to the crime. The science did not close the case. Instead, it left a gap, one that would be filled, in the Memphis courtroom, by testimony and suspicion rather than hard proof. James Earl. Ray pleaded guilty to murdering Martin Luther King Jr. on March 10, 1969. There was no trial, no jury, no cross-examination of evidence. The entire proceeding lasted less than an hour. Ray, a small-time thief with a history of prison escapes, stood before a Memphis judge and accepted a sentence of 99 years. The transcript shows Ray answering in short, clipped phrases. Yes, he understood. Yes, he was guilty. The judge asked if he had been pressured. Ray said no, but within days he began to change his story. By June 1977, Ray had recanted his confession. In a televised statement, he insisted he was not the shooter and claimed he had been set up by a mysterious man named Rowell. He pressed for a jury trial, arguing that his guilty plea had been forced by threats and promises of leniency that never materialized. The courts refused to reopen the case. For the next 2 decades, Ray filed motions, gave interviews, and tried to withdraw his plea. Each request was denied. In March 1997, Dexter King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s youngest son, met Ray face-to-face at Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. The footage from that meeting shows Dexter King asking Ray directly, "Did you kill my father?" Ray replied, "No, I didn't." Dexter King responded, "I believe you, and my family believes you." The moment was brief but historic, a public declaration of doubt from the King family itself. The official record still listed Ray as the lone assassin. But the absence of a trial, the recantation, and the King family's own skepticism left the case unresolved. The door remained open for a deeper investigation, one that would arrive quietly in a Memphis courtroom decades later. Inside Shelby County Circuit Court, the King family's case against Lloyd Jowers unfolded over 4 weeks in late 1999. The courtroom was small, the stakes immense. Coretta Scott King sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by her children. The defendant, Lloyd Jowers, a Memphis restaurant owner, faced allegations that he had helped arrange the killing of Martin Luther King Jr., not alone, but as part of a web that includes local police, organized crime, and unnamed government agencies. 70 witnesses took the stand. Their testimony filled more than 1,300 pages of transcript. Some were former FBI agents. Others were police officers, friends of Jowers, or people who claimed to have seen money change hands in the weeks before the assassination. The jury, 6 black and 6 white Memphians, listened as Exhibit 12, a bank ledger showing a $30,000 cash withdrawal by Frank Liberto, was entered into evidence. They heard the wiretap transcript of Lieutenant Earl Clark discussing the King situation. They were shown documents, letters, and photographs gathered over decades. The case was civil, not criminal. The King family asked for a symbolic sum, $100,000, making clear they sought not money, but a public record. The defense argued that Jowers was a liar, seeking attention and profit. Yet the jury heard from Jowers himself, who testified that he had hidden the murder weapon and passed it to a man he would not name. They heard from witnesses who placed government agents in the shadows around the Lorraine Motel that afternoon. On December 8, 1999, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. They found that Lloyd Jowers and others, including governmental agencies, had conspired to kill Dr. King. The verdict was read into the record and entered as Exhibit 31. No television cameras broadcast the decision. No major newspaper splashed it across its front page. But the finding stands. A jury of 12, after weighing the evidence, declared that the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was the result of a conspiracy that reached far beyond a lone gunman. The verdict in Memphis landed with barely a ripple beyond the courtroom walls. The Department of Justice responded with a 150-page report in June 2000, dismissing the jury's finding as the product of inconsistent and uncorroborated testimony. The DOJ's review, led by Civil Rights Division attorneys, combed through the trial transcript, FBI files, and every piece of evidence the King family had assembled. Their conclusion was blunt: no reliable proof of a government-directed conspiracy. The report acknowledged the FBI's campaign against King, wiretaps, blackmail, the forged suicide letter, but insisted that these actions, however shameful, did not connect to the events in Memphis on April 4, 1968. The DOJ's language was clinical. The evidence, they wrote, falls short of establishing the existence of a conspiracy. The phrase became the official answer. Major newspapers echoed the government's line or ignored the verdict entirely. The Washington Post's editorial board called the trial a misguided search for closure, arguing that the civil verdict could not overturn decades of criminal investigation. The New York Times ran a brief on page A24. Television news gave it a passing mention, if any. The story faded from the national conversation almost overnight. The King Center, in response, published the full trial transcript online in 2022, inviting the public to read the evidence for themselves. More than 70 witnesses. Over 1,300 pages. The record is now open, but the official narrative remains unchanged. The DOJ's dismissal and the media's silence stand in sharp contrast to the jury's unanimous verdict. The question is not just what happened in Memphis, but who gets to decide which evidence matters and which history is remembered. Here is what is documented, not alleged. Documented. The government targeted Martin Luther King, tried to destroy him, and withheld that record for decades. What remains disputed is how far that campaign went. Official files still hide critical details, mainstream narratives still sidestep the 1999 verdict. Until full transparency prevails, trust in our history remains incomplete. If this investigation changes how you see American power, share your perspective below.